Hey, welcome to the Chasing Justice podcast. I'm your host, Chealsia Smedley. I'm a writer and editor here at Chasing Justice. This season, we're talking about civic engagement and all the ways that that shows up in how we love the people around us. We've talked about things that are more politically related in the last couple episodes, and today we're talking about the relational side of things. Today, we're talking about mutual aid, and we have our very own Katie Nguyen Palomares to talk to us about that. Katie is the sound engineer for the Chasing Justice podcast. She's a program manager at Kingdom Capital Network and is the co-host of the Beauty in Between podcast. She's passionate about supporting others to make kingdom impact through their everyday rhythms and community. Off duty, you'll find her reading. In her bio, she said books like chips, climbing, or enjoying coffee and good conversation. Katie, thanks so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here in this space with you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So before we go any deeper, can you give us a quick definition of mutual aid and how you see it?
Yes, and emphasis on how I see it. The way that I've actually been describing it recently is that I see mutual aid as setting a table. In the context of my job, I get to set the table, send out the invitations, put everything that I have on the table, whether it be from my individual talents and skills and giftings and whatever that is, as well as like any communities that I'm attached to, that I can also sort of put those on the table as well. And then whoever else comes to the table is invited, and hopefully there's a space created where they can also put everything on the table, whether it's a need or their own, again, skills, backgrounds, whatever they have, and that we're all just coming to the table together, putting everything out there and looking around and seeing, hey, there's this thing that this person needs help with over there, and that person over there has something that can help them. Let's connect them, and vice versa, just along those lines.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Kingdom Capital Network?
That's a good point. Yeah, a little bit more about what I do is that I work for a local nonprofit to Austin, and we service primarily Black and Brown Christian small business owners in a lot of different ways. My role specifically within that org is that I get to sort of function as a spiritual discernment shepherding partner of sorts with the business owners we serve. And the idea is that I get to meet with them and hold all of their intersectionalities together as people of color, as business owners of color in this country, as people of faith, members of a church community, members of a family, all the different pieces, to be able to just hold space for them to sit and be still and just notice where God is and has been moving around them, because business owners, especially small business owners, move at a lightning pace. In some ways they need to, but in other ways they need to slow down too. A big conversation we talk about a lot is that rest is also a work. But yeah, so that's what my role is specifically within that org.
I know that Kingdom Capital Network, one of the ways that you guys help small businesses owners in Austin is like through practical support, like low interest business loans, one-on-one mentoring, community cohorts. So how do you kind of see that falling under the umbrella of mutual aid?
So Keystone, but also image from scripture that our org has had from the very beginning was that imagery at the end of Acts 2, where its verse were together and held everything in common, and that when someone had need, essentially someone else met it, which sounds like a really cute and sweet depiction. But our engagement with that verse is that those who were identifying as Christians and were by no means in power, or in many ways even had any real way to affect change at a like broad systemic Roman Empire type level. And they understood that. So instead of knocking on glass ceilings, they prioritized relationship and they prioritized community, and they taking care of their neighbors in a very real way. So what KCN does is that we offer the lowest interest possible loans to our business owners, but also we add an extra step where our KCN board and team decides whether or not we're going to choose to disperse a loan, not so much based on do they have the right history, and instead, do they have the right history as far as are they engaged in community? Have they shown to be faithful members of the body in our city and in their local congregations and in their communities? And then we also pair them with business mentors who have been in their industry, and then we don't just give them the tools and resources and say, good luck. We take them into community and actually engage with them. We learn more about where their story aligns with the businesses that they've started and are running, but also where that intersects with just who they are as human beings, and how they can be a part of bringing the kingdom down here in Austin, is what I always say, with their business, but also just as humans.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it, again, goes back to that table, right? Like, I can just, as you're speaking, I can imagine the table and people coming from, like, all of these different walks of life, and the table, like, continues to grow as these, like, networks continue to bring other people in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it's really cool. So what kind of ignited your passion for these things, and, like, what has inspired you to engage, not just now in working for Kingdom Capital Network, but also in your everyday life?
I'm glad that I have a therapist, because I feel like this is a really deep question. What I'm doing now is a culmination of what, in a lot of ways, I've always been predisposed to do. When I was little, my parents went through a divorce. There was a lot of just hard, nasty, some abusive things that were present in that divorce that as a young child were just hard to experience. And I essentially, from the ripe young age of 4, decided that I didn't want anyone to experience the depth of pain and fallout of trauma that I experienced and was experiencing. So I sort of had this element of seeking out injustices in the world. I wouldn't have described it in that way for a lot of my growing up years, but whether that was looking around the classroom when I was in school and noting who the introverts were that I knew they had good thoughts to share, so I would like raise my hand and then be like, Emily has something to say. Go ahead. Or up to the point of when I worked at a white evangelical church here and decided that I was going to stay there and like change the system and stop the harm that it was causing, to now working with KCN, I get to seek out through relationships with mutuality at the foundation of it, as well as a sense of collective flourishing and generative community, just caring for itself, that there's a proactive element where we get to go out and like invite them to the table, so to speak, but there's also as I get to just participate and sit back at the table, and I've gotten to watch so many good conversations and brilliant ideas come out of just the business owners getting to talk with each other.
I'm thinking about how, yeah, like mutuality, these like big words, like they really just mean like being in relationship with each other, being able to see like all of who we are, to notice like the needs of someone, but also to notice the strengths of someone else too. Like, yes. I think that's something that you also pointed out, like little you being like, I see your strength. Like,
yes. 100%.
And then I think, we've talked a lot about this table and how that ultimately is like listening to other people and being able to have like this kind of like listening first approach, right? Not coming in saying like, I know what you need, but coming in and saying like, okay, who are you? And show me what your life is and what's going on and where do you intersect?
Yes, totally.
And so can you walk us through a little bit more about how this like listening first approach is important in mutual aid?
I think I almost want to break this down into like 3 phases. So I also have a teaching background. So in that world of teaching, there's like passive listening, where there's just kind of the nodding, and you just like, especially with students, they just kind of want to get out of the room and be like, okay, let me go talk about what's really interesting in the hallways. There's active listening, where there is an active engaging of some sort with whatever's in front of you. When it comes to the topic and conversation about mutuality and mutual aid, I think there's also an element of what I'm going to call proactive listening, where before you're even in conversation with anyone, before you're able to meet at the table and hear about all of their things, you have to go find each other. And there's a lot of different reasons where there might be barriers to finding each other. There's a piece of somebody has to decide that they're going to look for the blind spots in their community, the voices and the perspectives and the backgrounds that maybe they don't already have around them, with the understanding that, no, these other communities who are different than mine actually have a lot for me to learn from that I'm not getting because I'm not in relationship with those communities. So let me decide to go start a conversation and start a relationship.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about how mutual aid is different from charity. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. Charity is like, just in a lot of ways, is also just one dimensional and one direction. That sort of lends into savior complex and that unhelpful space and mentality, whereas there's an element where mutual aid starts with the recognition and full understanding that all parties involved in the mutual aid process are all image bearers, which actually means something. Image bearers who have been built and gifted and deposited skills and talents and a story individually, that everyone has something to bring. Mutual aid can swim, I really like my metaphors. Mutual aid can swim up and down the river, so to speak. If charity is just floating down the river one way and just sort of letting things trickle down, mutual aid goes up and down and says like, hey, you can come in here too, and you have something to offer, and we have something to talk about because we're both human beings.
How does kind of this approach, because like, okay, we're looking at these practical things, we're looking at like the fact that we are all people, we all live under these systems that kind of have effects on everyone, right? And so how does this like mutual and relational approach also help address like the system, which does make those differentials of like it is unequal, and there are people that are better off in the systems that we live in than others. And so how does that help us?
The founder of KCN, he sort of described, there's the idea that you could have just done the trickle down, like here's some dollars and good luck with your business. But that doesn't change systems. That doesn't change the narrative or the overall why they didn't have these resources to begin with. So the hope of KCN is that we're going upstream so that we can distribute tangible funds. We can distribute business expertise in the form of mentorship. But we also see that we can distribute, so to speak, really invite all of these business owners. The idea is that we're going upstream, giving them access and training, but also community so that they can interact with each other and build their own ideas. If we're talking about business ownership specifically, there are a lot of cracks in that foundation that have favored a particular type of business owner. The idea is that we're not the ones who are coming in and saying we can fix the cracks, because that wouldn't work anyway. We're going for a more holistic formation, relational, mutual approach, where we're saying from over here, not in business ownership, that we see the cracks and that we have some access to resources that could probably help, but we're letting the business owners tell us what actually needs to be done. They're the ones who are actually designing the plans of how to approach fixing the cracks, and with the hope that we're going upstream with our business owners, and that from inside these communities that have been negatively impacted by systemic injustice and barriers and access to resources and all of those things, that from inside of those communities, genuine flourishing and generational wealth can be built and can come out of them doing it themselves with support from each other.
Nice. Okay, so kind of getting practical, I know that a lot of people are drawn to the principles of mutual aid, again, because it is this like idea of like collective flourishing and communal care. What advice would you give to listeners who want to engage in mutual aid or similar efforts within their own communities? Yeah.
So essentially two things. Be proactive listeners and be humble listeners. What I mean in that is like going back to the table metaphor, it's like walking around a banquet hall and looking for the folks whose tables have been decimated for some reason or another, and going over and asking why. And so be proactive, be humble, and be curious. There's the element of going over and asking why, and not coming in with the assumption that you do have the answers or the resources, but that there is something uniquely powerful as designed by God in image bearers coming together in community to care for whatever needs to be cared for, to care for whoever needs to be cared for. And that might mean leaving temporarily the comfort of your own tables and your own community, and just again stepping into those spaces that might feel unfamiliar, if not uncomfortable, and just asking questions and acknowledging your place in relationship to whoever it is that you're interacting with, that you're wanting to build a relationship and truly learn and be a student of other people's stories, not because you think that you have the tool belt that you can apply the quick fix to, but because you're human and we've been designed to be communal, and that we've been designed as a body for individual body parts to strengthen and give aid to when other body parts are weakened, that we're just acting in how we've been designed by our creator when we learn more about what the other body parts are doing and how we can potentially help.
Yeah, and I think that can open the door to so much more of like, okay, what does it look like for us to collaborate together and to help each other like meet our needs and help each other flourish in this world. So thank you so much, Katie.
Absolutely. I'm glad we got to have this conversation with all of my metaphors.
Well, all right, friends, that's a wrap on today's episode. Remember, we want to hear from you. I want to hear about what mutual aid looks like in your community, and what it looks like for you to create space and set a table for the people around you. So drop us a comment on IG or YouTube, and let's keep the conversation going. If you haven't already, share, like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And thank you for tuning in. Let's stay engaged, stay curious, and keep chasing justice together. Bye.